Another game, another injury. Yep, that's the life of being a Toronto Raptors fan, and we will be discussing that as well as the game against the Chicago Bulls. But before we do that, I want to talk about the two offensive stars on the Toronto Raptors. And those two players had a big night last night. And of course, I'm referring to RJ Barrett and Gradey Dick, who both had pretty stellar games last night. But I kind of want to talk about their evolution as players in Toronto and how their growth can mean something for the Toronto Raptors moving forward, because I think that there's a lot to be excited about with those two players, especially on the offensive end, because those two players are multi-talented, dynamic offensive players who have a lot of different interesting things about their games that we're going to be getting into. And those are two of the players that I did deep dives on in the off season, and if you want to take a look at those, just go into my video feed and scroll back a little bit and see if you can find both of those. They have both made some strides this season. They have both showed their limitations in different ways, and there are still question marks about them as players, but both of them are still very young, and there's a lot that I could see them building on and getting better as their careers progress. We will start with the younger of the two. We'll move in chronological order and begin with Gradey Dick, who has been a pretty consistently productive player on the offensive end for the Toronto Raptors, although he's not without his peaks and valleys as a player. One of the biggest leaps that he's made this season over last season has been his ability outside of shooting. Gradey Dick has added a lot of different little elements to his game that have allowed him to become more of a dynamic offensive player, not just a shooter. I know that that has been the common refrain. If you watch Raptors games, you've heard the broadcast staff mention it multiple times. He's not just a shooter, he's not just a shooter. And he really isn't. He has done a lot to make himself a player that can do a lot on the offensive end. So let's break down what that is. Gradey is averaging 18.5 points on 42% from the field, 34% from three, with 3 rebounds, 2 assists, about a steal, and 1.5 turnovers. And that might not seem very impressive because the shooting splits, he's shooting 90% from the free throw line, so that's pretty impressive. He hasn't been that efficient, and really what has brought his efficiency down has been his shooting, and his shooting from beyond the arc. Gradey Dick is shooting 7.5 threes a game, which is quite a lot. It makes up almost exactly half of his shot attempts. And he's only shooting 34% from three-point range, which is not very good for a shooter, a guy who is supposed to be one of the knockdown shooters. That's his A1 skill. However, I think that he is drawing a lot of attention on the perimeter. He's very rarely left alone. He's being keyed in on by opposing defenses. And with that said, he's also missing makeable shots, so it's not all on the opposing defensive schemes. I think that he has some room for growth there as well. I think that he needs to be a better shooter just in general. One of the biggest areas of growth for Gradey Dick has been his mid-range game, and he has kind of transformed himself into one of the better mid-range shooters in the NBA. He has a very nice pull-up jump shot, which he utilizes in order to punish players who close out too hard on him. And I think that that is one of the better tools for a shooter to have, is the ability to run off of the line, step inside before the help defense can reach you, and then shoot an accurate mid-range shot. Usually those shots are going to be very open because teams do not want to concede baskets in the paint. They do not want to concede baskets from three-point range, so they are going to be leaving that area relatively blank. The range between 10 feet from the basket and the three-point line is going to be kind of a no man's land where there's not going to be a lot of defense being played, and if you can knock down that jump shot consistently, that could be a very deadly scoring tool for you. But the idea is that you have to be very efficient from that range in order to make it worth it. If you're shooting just over 40%, that's not going to cut it. If you're shooting 40% from three-point range, the math is much different than if you're shooting just over 40% from inside the arc. So you need to be shooting somewhere around 50% in order to make that shot worth it in the modern NBA, because teams are doing the math. They want to figure out what they can live with. You have to measure the efficiency of any shot that you take against the general efficiency of the team. And the teams have generally just done the math. If you are in the mid-range area and you're shooting in the low 40s, that is a shot that you are willing to give up as a defense because it is a less efficient shot than a team would get normally. Thankfully, that is not the case for Gradey Dick. Gradey Dick is shooting 50% from 10 to 16 feet from the basket and around 45% between 16 feet and 3-point range. So in that mid-range area, he's shooting close to 50%, which is a very healthy margin. And I think that if he can continue to do that and continue to hit shots in that range, especially in later game scenarios when you need a 2-point shot and you simply need a good quality look at the basket, teams are going to be loading up in the paint, that could be a consistent shot for you, and it can be something that you can go to if you need a basket. I think that the efficiency is also something that isn't the end-all be-all. I think that how his moves look, what he's added to his game, how he's getting his baskets, I think that most people will be pleased. They'll say, yeah, he looks good when he's playing. Generally, what we're seeing right now is a player that's learning to score. He's learning to score in a bunch of different ways, and the efficiency isn't quite at the level that it needs to be in the NBA, but I do see the vision, and I do think that he has potential as a player, as an offensive player. I think that hitting the raw number stat of 18.5 points a game in your second season, that means something. I think that it means that his confidence has reached the point where makes and misses aren't going to be adjusting his shot diet that much. He is going to shoot a shot regardless of whether the last one went in. And that's what you want to see from your shooter. And it really helped him in last night's game when he started off ice cold from 3. And in fact, I made a comment. I said, he can do everything except hit 3-point shots. But as the game went on, in the fourth quarter, he got very hot from 3 and brought the Raptors right back into it. I think that you're starting to see a player develop that confidence that all good scorers need and score in a variety of ways. Scoring in a variety of ways is very important for a younger player. You don't want them to be one-trick ponies. Someone that you build your team around, either they have to be the best at one particular skill, which Gradey has not shown the capability of doing, which is being, an elite 3-point shooter. You want to be able to see what they can do outside of that. So if Gradey Dick at any point in his career starts shooting 40% or over from 3-point range, and continues to have all of the other skills that he has shown so far. So the good off the dribble production, the good pull-up shot, his acrobatic finishes once he's gotten other players to bite on pump fakes, his ability to run in transition, all of those are going to be tools that help him score at the NBA level. So I'm liking the process from what I've seen from him so far, but you cannot ignore the efficiency. 34% from 3 from a 3-point specialist is not very good, but the thing that I'm holding out hope on is the free throw efficiency. So Gradey Dick, his 2 seasons in the NBA, he is shooting 90% from the free throw line this season, and he shot 86% from the free throw line last season. He is almost an automatic player at the line. Free throw shooting and 3-point shooting are very correlated, and there's no surprise there. The ability to replicate a shooting motion and the mechanics that go along with it, that is how you become an accurate 3-point shooter, is simply having that muscle memory where you are able to recreate your shot motion. If you have that capability, which Gradey Dick definitely has, you will start to see the fruits of that sooner or later. I think that eventually Gradey Dick is going to figure it out and become a good 3-point shooter. And when that happens, all of the hard work and all of the growth that you've seen in the other areas of his game is going to pay off. Next up, we have to talk about RJ Barrett. And RJ Barrett, he is a young guy, 24 years old. However, he is a 6-year vet. I think that he has exhibited a level of polish that we have not seen from Gradey Dick yet. And we're starting to see what RJ Barrett is capable of this season, especially in a starring role. When he was with the Toronto Raptors, and also, I have to say, I did a lot of the viewing of RJ Barrett and his growth as a player via the Canadian national team. And in those roles, he was a secondary creator, a secondary player in those systems where he would get the second best perimeter defender and he would be able to make things happen, attacking closeouts and doing some of the stuff that secondary players do in the half court. In this season, however, with Scottie Barnes having missed so much time, he has been thrust into the primary creator role with the Toronto Raptors. And I'm not going to say that it's gone perfectly. I mean, the Toronto Raptors have lost a ton of games this season, and RJ has been very up and down. But you can't look at the statistics that he has put up and be too unhappy with what we've been able to see from him. So RJ Barrett is scoring 23.5 points on 45% from the field, 35% from three, with 7 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game, and about a steal with 3.5 turnovers. The turnovers are a little concerning. 6 to 3.5. It's a little under the 2 ratio that you want to see from your lead guard. However, I think that I have been blown away in terms of what I've been able to see from him in terms of creating shots for himself and his teammates. I did not think that RJ Barrett really had that in his game. I believe that he was more of an off-ball player. I thought that any creation chops that he was going to have would be as a result of the creation of others. I really didn't foresee him being able to utilize screens as well as he's been able to. I thought that maybe he was going to be too reliant on his left hand. He has shown the ability to go right, and he has expanded his offensive repertoire to the point where I think that he is going to be a good offensive player for the remainder of his career and should be tasked with a decent amount of creation in the half court. And how he gets that is still a little bit of a mystery. As the team grows and gets older and, knock on wood, gets healthier, my God, it's just horrible. It's like reliving the same nightmare over and over again with all these injuries. But knock on wood, once the team gets fully healthy, I think that having him as the number 2 creator in the half court would be a pretty smart decision, because I think that with the ball in his hands, he is making the correct play more often than not. He does have a tendency to turn the ball over, but I will give him a break here. RJ Barrett is trying to turn water into wine most nights for the Toronto Raptors. He does not have a ton to work with all of the injuries on the Raptors. One of the bread and butter plays that he has is to Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl is almost free money for point guards because he has that float shot. He's very crafty as a finisher. As a benefit for ball handlers, he puts the shot up pretty quickly after he gets it. There's no faffing about or no, multi-move sequences where he takes the assist away because he took too long to get into his post move. He's pretty quick at getting the ball up. But outside of that, the Raptors don't really have a consistent assist outlet for RJ Barrett. The 3-point shot with Ochai Agbaji is another way that he can get assists, but he has to force a lot of passes. A lot of the assists that he does get come off of cuts and backdoor cuts to the basket, and a lot of the time that does work out because they sneak behind the defense doesn't pick up on it. He uses his vision very well to find those types of players. Unfortunately, those are the types of passes, those are high turnover type passes. Passes where you're able to kick it out to a 3-point shooter, those rarely get picked off. That's why the drive and kick is such an effective play in NBA offenses, because a lot of the time you're kicking it out to an open player and they're able to shoot a corner 3-point shot or just a 3-point shot in general. It's a low turnover, high reward play because you're shooting a 3-point shot. However, the Raptors shooting is not very good this season. As I've mentioned, Gradey Dick has been struggling a little bit from 3-point range. You have Ochai Agbaji, who's been very consistent from 3-point range. But outside of him, the Raptors have really been lacking shooting. And for a point guard, RJ Barrett has really been for the Raptors. He has been the Toronto Raptors point guard this season for the most part. It's really difficult to generate assists if you don't have consistent shooters, because they're going to pack the paint, they're going to put a lot of pressure on you in the paint, and then you're going to have to make some of those passes that I was talking about, where you try and thread the needle through multiple limbs to get to a guy who is standing on the weak side for a layup, and those turn into turnovers quite a bit. But to RJ's credit, he has made a lot of those passes. He has been able to get those looks to players who are cutting to the rim. He has been able to make those difficult, high degree of difficulty passes that result in easy baskets. And these are not just fake assists that he's piling up. These are real assists. And when you watch him, he has 2 or 3 very high level passes every night, which is something that you want to see from your point guard. In terms of scoring, it's been hot and cold. RJ Barrett is a guy who likes to get into the paint and score. And when other teams have poor interior defense like the Chicago Bulls did yesterday, you're going to see RJ Barrett succeed. I think that he's actually a pretty good 3-point shooter from catch and shoot. I think that he can space the floor for other players if they have the ball in their hands. I think that's one of his strengths. And I think that if long-term Scottie Barnes and RJ Barrett are going to play together, having both of those players in or around the 35% mark or above then your offense is going to work just fine, especially if you have shooters at other spots. We talked about RJ, we've been talking about Gradey Dick, talking about them as offensive players because both of them have very tantalizing offensive skill sets, especially projected forward in the case of Gradey Dick especially. I am excited for them on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball is another story, and it creates questions in my mind about whether one of these players is going to have to come off of the bench long-term in order to create a system that works. Gradey Dick, will talk about his defensive shortcomings first. It's relatively simple. What I am concerned about is screen navigation. And I think I've brought this up before when discussing Gradey Dick. Screen navigation is being able to follow perimeter players around the court when they are being screened for. RJ Barrett is a different problem on defense. He has an issue with off-ball defense, and I don't know if this is something that can be cured because he is, as I've mentioned, in his 6th season. You're starting to see things cement. Things are starting to calcify. There's less room for growth when you're that experienced and you're still making these kind of mistakes that he's making, where he has been leaving players open. That is really his Achilles heel, is that he is a bit of a ball watcher. You're seeing where the ball handler is going so you can, help out. And boy, does he ever like to help out. And I don't mean that in a good way. Maybe you can hear the sarcasm in my voice. He will help when it's not necessary. You could have an elite defender. Davion Mitchell's an excellent defender. He does not need too much help when he is guarding a perimeter player, especially when there's a player like Jakob Poeltl in the game. Jakob Poeltl also provides that second layer of defense at the rim. You don't need to be playing very far off of your man if they are in the corner. The corner shot is the second most efficient shot in basketball. And the number of times I have seen RJ Barrett unnecessarily help off of a man in the corner this season has been astronomical. It is a huge problem, and it's kind of driving me crazy. I mention it every time in almost every video. So if you have, on one hand, Gradey Dick just kind of, being unable to get around screens, and you have RJ Barrett helping way too far off of his man in the corner, you're going to have problems with your defense down the road for the Toronto Raptors. Maybe that's a problem for another day. But having Gradey Dick and RJ Barrett on the court at the same time may be an issue when the Raptors are in a position to compete. I know it seems like a far time off, but I don't think it's going to be that far. Maybe the next couple of seasons, they're going to try and start making the playoffs. That's when you're going to start seeing it be a problem. And maybe the solution is simply to just have one of them come off the bench. And maybe that's something that you can ponder and let me know in the comments what you think the long-term solution is for the two of them. Maybe even a trade is something that could be required at a certain point, but that's a conversation for another day. Leave a comment if you have a thought on that. But why don't we get to the game? And I think that that's a good jumping off point. We can talk about the individual performances. So we will discuss first and foremost the player that left with an injury, Jakob Poeltl. Jakob Poeltl left with what looked like and was reported to be a groin injury in I believe it was the 3rd quarter of last night. He slipped on a wet spot on the court and did sort of the splits, and geez, just the look on his face, and he crumpled into a heap on the floor. It was very ugly. And he was able to leave the court under his own strength. He didn't need any help. So unless he's unbelievably tough, maybe he is. I mean, he looks tough. So maybe he's just gutting it out, but hopefully it's not too serious. Regardless of whether, you want him traded or you want to keep him, Jakob Poeltl is a fantastic pro. He seems like a great guy. Everyone always raves, no matter whether he's on the team or he's a former teammate, about his professionalism, his work ethic, his spirit, his character. Everyone says that he is one of the best teammates they've ever had, and you can tell that he commands a great deal of respect in the dressing room. And I've come to respect him as a player. Hopefully he can get well soon. In terms of what I saw from him, he was having a good game. He scored the first 4 points for the Toronto Raptors, and he went quiet after that. One of the sickening things that I saw is because I go on Twitter to get updates, and stories so that I can see up-to-date information. And I searched for his name, and many people on Twitter were cursing at him for not scoring enough points for their parlay. This is in a game when he went down with a groin injury. Really just sickening behavior, and it's starting to wear thin on me. I'm really not enjoying that aspect of our sport at the moment. I'm really kind of getting ticked off at the whole gambling aspect of it. Maybe I can do a video on that at some point, but yeah, he finished 6 points on 7 shots, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, 1 turnover, and defense. Another thing that's so stupid about the whole parlay thing is this guy, his main role on the team is to provide defense, okay? He can have a good game while scoring 6 or 8 points. His job is to stop other teams from scoring in the paint, and he does that very well. Why are you betting on his points? That just doesn't make any sense to me. But when Jakob Poeltl is off the court, the Toronto Raptors really struggle to protect the basket and get rebounds. And because Scotty Barnes isn't in the game, and because the Raptors don't really have a good defensive rebounder outside of Poeltl, when he would go to contest the shot, there would be nobody in the paint to grab the rebound, and then the Bulls would just grab the offensive rebound and score. So lots of problems with the Raptors right now, and it looks like Jakob Poeltl is going to be sidelined for a little bit. So, the tank is fully on. I said that the Toronto Raptors were too good to really tank without making trades. Yeah, well, there was another way, and it's having the 2 best players on the Toronto Raptors get injured, or third best player if Jakob Poeltl, depending on what you think of Jakob Poeltl and RJ Barrett. Yeah, you're gonna be pretty bad, especially if you're already not very good. Tough night. RJ Barrett had a very good game. 32 points on 24 shots. He was 2 of 4 from 3. He was 8 of 9 from the free throw stripe. Very encouraging that he's making his free throws. 5 rebounds, 9 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks, and 6 turnovers. So some of the issues that I mentioned earlier did become a problem. Trying to create those very difficult passes, that's something that you got to do. You got to try and make things happen. And unfortunately, it did result in a bunch of turnovers, but it did result in a bunch of assists. 9 assists is a good mark to hit. Some of the mistakes that he made toward the end of the game was simply just not feeding the hot hand in Gradey Dick, who was scorching hot. But outside of that, I mean, what else can you expect from RJ Barrett? He is being asked to score. He's being asked to make plays, and against the Bulls, he did that. And it helped that Nikola Vucevic is a very poor rim protector. Bulls just really don't have much in terms of paint protection. And so a guy like RJ Barrett, who's very good at scoring in the paint, is going to have a field day, and he did. 32 points, 5 rebounds, 9 assists. Like, what can you say? He had a pretty masterful performance. I thought it was one of his best games of the season, and he got the Raptors really close to stealing a game from the Chicago Bulls. So I was very pleased with what he did. I feel more and more confident in him as an offensive player. Next up, we'll talk about Gradey Dick. I thought Gradey Dick was phenomenal in terms of scoring. For most of the night, I was praising his ability to score outside of the three-point shooting and lamenting his three-point shooting. I was like, oh my God, this guy is fantastic except for the shooting. He can't shoot. He's a shooter who can't shoot. And then, just to spite me, and I'm not complaining because I was very happy when it started happening, Gradey Dick started to heat up and start making his shots, and it got the building going. The building was like dead silent, especially after Jakob Poeltl's injury, kind of sounding like a tomb in there, but Gradey Dick really got things to pop off. And that's really the fun of a elite shooter, is when they start getting hot, the blood starts pumping. You start getting excited as a fan of the team. You can really start feeling people get behind a player who's on fire. It's a really fun experience. And hopefully Gradey Dick can get to that point, but he was scoring in all sorts of different ways. He was in transition. He is a good athlete. That is one of the things I didn't mention when I was talking about him as an offensive player, is that his athleticism it's underrated. When he gets ahead of steam going to the basket, he looks dynamic and quick, and it's very pleasing to see him run in transition and finish with those creative finishes. Thought he had a very good game, and it really, really helps that he made those threes towards the end, because it would have been a very polarizing performance. I would have to praise him for his other things and then sort of just pull my hair out at the shooting, but he was able to contribute in that area too. And then on defense, he did a good job of covering Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball is one of the very inspiring stories in the NBA. He's come back from a major knee problem, and I think that players see this young shooter on the perimeter and they're like, haha, time to cook. And he did a really good job of staying in front of Lonzo Ball. Lonzo was having kind of a disastrous night. He missed pretty much every shot that he took, except at the end of the game when he hit a really clutch three. So, I think Gradey did an okay job on defense as well last night. After that, we'll talk Ochai Agbaji, who also had a really good night. Ochai Agbaji, 15 points, 6 of 10 from the field. He was only 1 of 5 from 3. So one of his shining skills, the corner three-point shot, I think that's been sniffed out by most teams. Players are sticking with him a little bit more on the perimeter, and he's having to take more difficult shots. He's had to move up the arc. He's shooting more above the break shots in order to shoot open threes. And I think that's obviously more challenging. I think that it's hurt his percentages a little bit, but it's also variance. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. He might have started a little hot and has cooled off, regressed to the mean a little bit, but I still think that he's a good shooter. And he was able to contribute in other areas outside of the shooting as well. He's a very good off-ball mover. He got behind the defense a couple of times last night for layups. RJ Barrett was able to find him a couple of times. He fills the break in transition. He's athletic. And that is why it's kind of upsetting when he does have invisible nights, and that's what drove me crazy last year, is that this guy has an NBA body. He is big and strong. He has quick feet. He's athletic. He should be able to chip in for a couple of baskets that don't involve three-point shooting. And last night, he showed that he could. If the team looks for him and tries to get him involved, because as an off-ball player, you're also kind of at the mercy of the lead ball handler. Are they going to pass you the ball? Are you going to get the ball enough in order to put points on the board? So the team also has to look for him and reward him for making those cuts. I thought that he was super effective guarding a good offensive player in Kobe White. He had a really nice block on Kobe where he closed out to him at the three-point line and then tracked Kobe all the way to the basket, and Kobe tried to reverse layup on the other side, and Agbaji just no-sirred it and sent it back. And he's a very solid defender, and he's going to give you a good defensive effort every night. And when he can chip in on the offensive end, he's doing the Lord's work. He's looking like a really, really good role player for the Toronto Raptors. Lastly, we'll talk Jonathan Mobo. He had a mixed game last night. So I think that Mobo, he provides a lot defensively. Of that, there is no doubt. He's good at switching. Whenever there is a pick and roll that he's involved in, you're very comfortable when he switches onto a perimeter player because he can swivel his hips and backpedal very quickly, stay in front of guys and contest shots. He is no doubt a very good defensive player, even as a rookie. The issue is that he makes mistakes. There was a very bad mistake that he made. One of the reasons that the Bulls were able to put a lot of space between themselves and the Raptors were the mistakes, not just he was making, but the team was making. When he and Davion Mitchell, oh my God, it was in transition, they both pointed at the same guy, seeming to ignore one another's commands. But it was really Mobo's fault. The Bulls got behind the Raptors defense in transition and got an easy basket. And that happened multiple times, and of course it's not just Jonathan Mobo, but there were a bunch of other mistakes that he made as well. The fouls can often be a problem with him. And then on offense, he's not really providing enough. 4 points, and he was 2 of 4 from the field, but he is lacking a consistent go-to option. He tried to break Nikola Vucevic down off the dribble and get inside and score, and that shouldn't be too difficult. Vucevic is not, he's kind of like a statue in the paint. He's not a good rim protector, but he got it sent back. Vucevic was, to his credit, able to just come from behind and block Mobo's shot. So he's got to find some way to score a little bit more consistently around the rim. Floaters I've suggested in the past. Maybe it's just his footwork needs to improve so that he can get maybe a good drop step going to the basket. Maybe he needs some way to explode off of the dribble a little more quickly and get to the rim faster. That can always be an option for smaller players. Sometimes the foot speed from a big is how you score on the inside. But yeah, he's got to improve his repertoire around the rim so that he can contribute, especially if he's going to play big minutes for the Toronto Raptors. So I thought it was a mixed bag from him. And he was part of the Raptors' comeback in the fourth quarter, so kudos to him on that part. Off of the bench, There was one real shining star for the Toronto Raptors, and we'll start with him first. Jamal Shead had a really good game in only 12 minutes, and he was one of the guys leading the charge, getting the Raptors back into the game in the fourth quarter. He didn't play at all in the first half. He played his first minutes in the second half, and he gave the Raptors a big jolt. He had 10 points. He was perfect from the field, 4 of 4. He was 2 of 2 from 3. He had 6 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 of them offensive rebounds as the smallest guy on the floor, only 1 turnover. He was phenomenal. And he banked in a 3 at the end of the game to make it a 1-point game. Good for him. But his 3-point shot is starting to look good. And I'm starting to get, I mean, it's an easy comparison to make because they're both small guards who like to play that pesky defense and get into guys. They're both guys that maybe were not on teams' radars when they were acquired. Jamal Shead has that dog in him, just kind of like Fred VanVleet. And if his 3-point shot, it is really starting to come around. He has been a lot better shooting the ball. If that is part of his bag, we're going to start to see more minutes from Jamal Shead. And I think that the Raptors have to start looking at Davion Mitchell as a guy that maybe it's time to sell high on or sell medium on. Whatever you think his value is at, maybe it's time for him to go to greener pastures, trade him to a playoff team where he can be a contributor there and make way for Jamal Shead, because I'm starting to become a Shead head again. The guy had a phenomenal night last night and was a big reason the Raptors were able to make a comeback. So loved what I saw from him. Kelly Olynyk had an okay night from what you usually see from him. His rim defense is still a big problem, although he does get a lot of steals just from being crafty and handsy and slapping balls, slapping the ball out of players' hands and that kind of stuff, veteran moves. He had 7 points on 6 shots, 3 rebounds, an assist, 2 steals. I thought it was a kind of mediocre performance from Kelly Olynyk. He showed some of the stuff he can do. I don't think it was a great performance from him. He didn't hit any threes. Hopefully he can start making those. I think with Jakob Poeltl going down, I think he has the opportunity to start and maybe be featured a little bit more, showcase him a little bit for a trade. I think that's kind of the route that I would prefer the Raptors to take with Kelly Olynyk. And Chris Boucher is up next. He had a really good box score night. So if you're box score watching, you'd say this guy had a fantastic night. 11 points on 8 shots. He was 0 of 2 from 3. So again, his 3 has really tailed off. He's not making that shot anymore. 10 rebounds, really good there, and a block. I don't think he had a great night. I think that he's a culprit on defense too often. There are a lot of mistakes being made out there between him and maybe Kelly Olynyk isn't making mistakes, but he is not up to the challenge around the basket. And he and Chris Boucher shared the floor a lot last night, and it doesn't really work defensively. And I think rebounding wise, it's okay. Those two can do a decent job on the boards. But when you have those two in, it's going to be kind of a disaster because neither are great perimeter defenders and both aren't very good rim protectors. Chris Boucher is a little bit better than Kelly Olynyk, but both leave something to be desired there. So both had personal foul problems, Kelly Olynyk and Chris Boucher. Kelly had 5 fouls, Chris Boucher had 4. So they were really hacking. And I think that's part of the reason that Darko decided to close with the young guys. And once Kelly Olynyk and Chris Boucher were off the floor, the Raptors kind of went on a run. So that's kind of why maybe both of those players didn't have as good a night as the box score would indicate. Davion Mitchell played as well. He played 16 minutes, had 3 points, 4 assists, only took 2 shots, and he made his only 3-point shot. That's how he got the 3 points. I've talked at length about this guy's defense. I think it's really good. He did do a good job on the perimeter players of the Bulls, but on the offensive end, 3 points and 3 turnovers. 3 turnovers, not a great mark. He is a negative on the offensive side of the ball, and usually he's able to play to par with the defensive end, but I'm starting to kind of doubt his long-term outlook on this team. It's really easy to doubt it when you see the guy that's kind of playing behind him, Jamal Shead, really have this phenomenal two-way effort and really start to show what he's capable of on offense. So yeah, I think it was an okay night for Davion Mitchell, but maybe the writing's on the wall there. And that was the game. The Toronto Raptors, I think this was a game of mistakes. I think this was a game of sloppiness. I think this was a game where the veterans were kind of standing in the way, as I mentioned when I talked about who was playing well and who wasn't. The only veteran who really played very well last night was Jakob Poeltl, and we all know what happened there. The Toronto Raptors, as a young team, I mean, it's understandable that they would make mistakes. A lot of the mistakes, though, are mistakes of not trying hard enough. I think that the Toronto Raptors let the Bulls run on them way too often. That was the biggest problem this game, was not getting back in transition. And if you are a young team, that is something that you should be good at. That is something that you should be able to match the energy of the Bulls with, is your young legs. You've had a huge amount of time off. You should not be tired. You should be ready to get up and run with the Bulls. It's kind of a bar. You should be able to get back in transition, and they didn't. Too many times. It has happened way too often. Darko Rajakovic had to burn tons of timeouts just giving the guys basic direction. Box out. He called a timeout after there was a brutal no box out, and there was nobody in the paint. When Jakob Poeltl went over to contest a shot, it was like a ghost town in the paint. You have to have a person in position to box out and grab defensive rebounds. That was an issue. The main one that you saw over and over and over was the Bulls running, getting behind the Raptors defense on misses and makes, on made shots. You can't be getting beat down the floor. The reason that you can run on misses well is because the other team grabs the defensive rebound and can make an outlet pass and does not have to inbound the ball. When you make a shot, the other team has to get the ball, check it, and then inbound it. That should give you enough time to get between the other team and the basket. It's frankly disgusting that that even has to be mentioned about a professional basketball team. You play basketball for a living. These are things that should just be ingrained in you to get back down the floor and hustle and stop the other team from getting behind you. But we will end on a high note, because at the end of the game, it was really sort of night and day. The Toronto Raptors were able to put together a big run where it was the youth of the team. Gradey Dick, RJ Barrett, Jamal Shed, Jonathan Mobo, Ochai Agbaji. Those are the guys of the future. Those are the guys who are going to be here for the long haul. And it was super encouraging to see all of those players playing really well together and getting the Raptors back into it with a small ball lineup. Played that aggressive help defensive style where you collapse in on the paint and then try and recover to shooters. It worked pretty well until the Bulls figured out that Nikola Vucevic is 7 feet tall, and then he started scoring in the paint with some easy entry passes. So yeah, that was pretty much the game. I think that as soon as Jakob Poeltl went down with injury, and even before that, it seemed like the Raptors just didn't have the juice to win this game. And I think that that's going to be a refrain that you're going to be hearing a lot, is that, yeah, they just didn't have enough firepower. They didn't have enough on the defensive end. They made it close. But let's take a look at the upcoming schedule. The Raptors will be playing the Brooklyn Nets on Thursday at 7:30. And I'm pretty excited to watch that game. I think that the Nets, they've dealt one of their best players in Dennis Schroeder to the Golden State Warriors, and they're a scrappy team. They've done better than people expected them to this season, but I think that what they did trading Schroeder is a harbinger of things to come for them. I think that they want to be part of the tanking proceedings. I don't think that they want to be winning too many games. I think that maybe they exceeded expectations for themselves a little bit too much this season, and now I think that they want to cool off and start losing games. But I don't know if the Raptors are going to let them. The Raptors are very, very injured. They just lost one of their best players. And Jordi Fernandez is a very good coach, so he might be able to coach them to a victory. It will be in Toronto, though. I think it'll be an exciting game to watch, and that is the episode. What do you think of Gradey Dick and RJ Barrett? Do you share my concern about them being able to play with one another long-term? Are you excited about their growth as players, as offensive players? Let me know here in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. And please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. It really helps out with the algorithm. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.